Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies and the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the 16th Giri Deshingkar Memorial Lecture. These memorial lectures were begun in 2001 as a tribute to the work and contribution of one of India's leading China experts, a philosopher of science, and an exceptional scholar on the history of China and India. This series not only honors Giri Deshinkar's legacy, but also continues his mission of fostering informed and critical engagement with China and India. The title of the 16th GDML is India in the Chinese Quest for Nationalism and Modernity, Perspectives from Chinese Travel Writings. Our distinguished speaker for the lecture is Professor Kamal Sheel. He is a former professor of Chinese language at the Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. He is an adjunct fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. He received a doctoral degree in the field of modern Chinese history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, USA. He has been visiting professor and fellow at the universities in Wisconsin, Madison, Yale, Copenhagen, Beijing, Singapore, and Taiwan, and in India in University of Delhi, Punjab University, Central University of Sikkim, and IIT BHU. His current research interest primarily lies in the area of social and intellectual history of China and cultural interaction and encounters in Asia with a focus on India and China. His major publication is Peasant Society and Marxist Intellectuals in China. He also has to his credit jointly edited volumes titled India on the Silk Route with Charles Willeman and Lalji, From Local to Global, Papers in Asian History and Culture with Kenneth Zitsk and Charles Willeman, 13 Months in China, A Subaltern Indian and Colonial World with Anand Young and Ranjana Sheel. His two other works with Professor Ranjana Sheel have been published with titles Kang Yo-wei Engages India, His Travel Narratives, 1901 to 1902, and Predicaments of Civilization and Nation, and Territorializing the Chinese Nation, Cartography, Geopolitics, and Huang Matsai's Mission to India, 1878 to 1880, by Routledge in 2024. Chairing the lecture today is Professor Patricia Uberoi, an emeritus fellow at the ICS. She served as the chairperson of the ICS from 2015 to 2021. Formerly, she was professor of social change and development at the Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi. Her research interests center on aspects of family, kinship, gender, popular culture, and social policy with respect to both India and China. She is the author of Freedom and Destiny, Gender, Family, and Popular Culture in India. She has edited several volumes, including Social Reform, Sexuality and the State, and Family Kinship and Marriage in India. She is the co-author of the BCIM Forum and Regional Integration. Before we begin the lecture, we have welcome remarks by the representatives of the two institutions who jointly celebrate the legacy of Giri Deshinkar. Representing the CSDS is Dr. Rakesh Pandey, who is an associate professor at the Center for Study of Developing Society. Over to you, Dr. Rakesh Pandey.
On behalf of CSDS, Center for the Study of Developing Societies, which happens to be Professor Giri Deshinkar's home institution for the longest time, I presume. I didn't have the privilege of meeting Professor Giri Deshinkar, but I'm so much familiar with this name, Giri, so many times. Pronounced by my senior colleagues at CSDS, like Dhirubhai Seth, Ashish Nandi, VB Singh, and many others. So in some senses, we all have this memory of Giri Deshinkar, the legendary China expert, and who was active with a major United Nations University program at CSDS in Peace Initiative, together with Rajni Kothari. His interest in science and Chinese studies, classical music, all those things we used to hear, and we cherish that. We also cherish this series of lecture a lot, which is in collaboration with ICS, because this is one of the very unique collaborations which CSDS as a social science research institute had been engaged, even though physically the institutions are not in the same building, but at the same time, this Giri remains one of our major anchors and linkages, and also one of the major Chinese studies scholars. So I just welcome you all on behalf of CSDS, and we hope we are going to have a great treat in terms of this lecture by Professor Sheel.
Next, I would request Professor Alka Acharya, Honorary Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies and Chairperson at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, to deliver welcome remarks. Over to you, Professor Acharya.
Thanks, Snigdha. Very, very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies. I'd like to begin by conveying to you all a message from our chairperson, Professor Srimati Chakrabarti, who very much wanted to be here, but she had actually had a prior travel engagement, which she could not really get out of. So she has sent her best wishes for this 16th GDML, and her regrets at not being here. Now, one far better qualified to speak on Giri will be following me, so I am not going to go there, except to say that as a collective of scholars working on China, we are actually gathered here to celebrate not just an individual but a spirit. Giri testifies, as he said, we all called him Giri, so yes, he testifies to a spirit of camaraderie and contention, of bonhomie with respect, which actually characterizes this group of scholars who have built up this institute. We have been the proud successors and, in one way, followers of this great group, which set the highest standards of academic research, and who collectively inspired us with their determination, with their never say die spirit. They were all tempered in the adversities of the post-62 scenario, and have withstood a whole lot of challenges, and they came through, creating the next generation of scholars, and that's really the legacy that we have inherited. And Giri was one of the most significant of them. I joined the institute at a time when Giri was very much part of CSDS and ICS. In fact, in the initial days, we used to have some rather interesting tussles as to who would, be sort of claiming him, as it were. But we heard CSDS all the time in the ICS, and CSDS people were very much part of our entire statutory bodies. And it was as Rakesh has just said, it was a very, very interesting fusion between a social science institute and a China studies related institute. And I think that has also given us very strong foundations. I'm going to stop there, but before that, I would like to show you something very interesting. This has come out of our investigations into the old ICS papers. very old photographs, and we had a lot of effort, and Akshat, who's standing at the back, actually scanned them all. We did not have as much technicalities at our disposal. Otherwise, we would have done things like zooming in and zooming out. But I think it shows a range of it actually covers a lot of ground. All the people sitting around here are actually there, and a great trip down memory lane. So with that, I would once again welcome you and thank you.
I will now call upon Professor Manoranjan Mohanty to offer his reflections on the legacy of Giri Deshinkar. Professor Mohanty is a founding member of the Institute of Chinese Studies, its former chairperson, and currently its emeritus fellow. He is former professor of political science, University of Delhi. He is a social scientist, China scholar, and a peace and human rights.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think, this new addition to the annual lecture, the photographic journey, that's a wonderful thing. And in fact, I don't have to say very much. And I'm very happy that besides Patricia and me from the earliest group, Shiv Shankar Menon is here, who has been part of this enterprise throughout and has seen us from close quarters, even though he has been in the government. And I see old friends here. Anyway, I will say just a couple of things because this is also the 55th year of the China Group. 69, 2024, is that 55? Right. Because 5 years ago in Sapru House, we had a 50th anniversary celebration. I remember that first trip in August 1969. I was riding a scooter. Giri had a car, but that day he came on my pillion. And we came to Sapru House launch, and we had sent a message to Vinod Khanna. He should have been here today. He was the desk officer, China, and one Anil Malhotra, his cousin, our friend in Berkeley, had told us that as soon as you reach, you must meet my cousin Vinod Khanna. So Giri, me, and Mira joined here, and GPD, we had sent a message, he had come, and Vinod Khanna. So we had tea in Sapru House canteen and then sat in the lawns. That was a Wednesday. And gradually, Thanchung, Patricia came the following weeks. Then, well, that's a long story. When Rajni Kothari realized that we were meeting in the lawns or in K. Subramaniam's office sometimes, because Subramaniam sometimes would say, why are you sitting in the lawns? Come. In those days, IDSA was in the Sapru House Annex. Then Rajni Kothari said, come, here is a place. Start meeting here. That's how we physically, Rakesh, started meeting in 29 Rajpur Road. I had some connection already. I had joined the first election survey with Rajni and Wasir in CSDS in 67. So, so the China Study Group, we called ourselves, that was born. And then it became a program of CSDS as the Institute of Chinese Studies. And then 2010 onwards, thanks to mainly Shiv Shankar Menon, uh, we had this interlude, I would say, happy interlude of an independent existence outside CSDS with Alka, then not honorary director, but director on deputation from JNU. The rest of the history is known to this generation. Giri Deshingkar was at the center of this entire enterprise as a China scholar and a unique scholar who was proficient in Chinese history, Indian history, and European history. He and his wife Saryu had sailed in a ship to London, and he worked in the Indian High Commission and joined the SOAS B Honours course in Chinese language. And that's how he started. He came back and started the China Report, first editor of China Report, when it was more or less a short pamphlet kind of thing. And then he gets selected along with Mira Sinha and a few others. I was also later on part of that group which went to various universities in the US in the Ford Foundation Fellowship to study. He went to Yale. And he was working for his PhD on founding of the Manchu dynasty. But he was called back to India to start, by then this program on Chinese studies had been launched in Delhi University with BP Dutt taken from JNU, from ISIS then to Delhi University to start the program. That's when people like Shiv Shankar later on became students of Delhi University history. Now, Giri was a unique scholar who defined what Sinology is and ought to be. Every morning, he would get ready and go to the office, that is our Chinese Studies department, and start reading. At that time, Ranbir Ripao was not easy to get. Later on, we started getting it through our MEA. He would have some Hong Kong journals who used not Pai Hua but Wen Hua, classical Chinese characters. I think one of the journals was Guangcha. And so he would every day read, and then very soon we arranged this Ranbir Ripao to be got from the MEA. MEA was very helpful in those days. MEA sent the Ranbir Ripao, and we got the newspapers. And he would read every day the People's Daily in Chinese. So language, literature, history. Now, he started Chinese studies when it was impossible for an Indian to go to China. And but he knew Chinese language, history, literature, rivers, mountains, religions, people, society, more than anybody else. And Mira then joined, and it was a great group. Anyway, gradually you'd know. Well, first of all, I'm so happy. First time we have an Indian scholar working in India delivering this lecture. We had Prasenjit Dwara before, but he is an Indian scholar, our student also, but teaching abroad. So I'm so happy to have Kamal Sheel here to deliver this lecture. And I don't want to take more time on this. Two things I would like to add. Whenever we had a debate as to what should be the shape of Chinese studies, because I came from social science. Several of us came from social science, Patricia, me, but Patricia was also in the Giri part. First studied Chinese in Hong Kong. Kishan Rana is not here, they were classmates. And then Chinese, then Chinese literature, then sociology, slowly, from Chinese to sociology, she came. I went from political science to Chinese. Now, Giri and I would always argue, Bira, Giri, our group would always argue. I would insist that area studies must be used to enrich social science. He would say that social science not only should learn from area studies, but should help area studies to grow. And this debate has had no end, and we have to integrate both. And that's how you see different kinds of departments in different universities all over the world. You should read. All of us have written on Chinese studies in India. Giri has an excellent essay on Sinology and area studies in China Report. You should read that. So Giri Deshinkar's intellectual legacy, and he was, well, in the presence of editor of editors, Patricia Uberoi, I want to recall that Giri Deshinkar was editor par excellence. And I mean, we had that tradition. 3-4 of us would always, whoever wrote anything will give to the others to read before publishing. And Giri would have his red pen. And if Giri pronounced you are a Finnish writer or something like that, I mean, it's such a certificate. I mean, it would be one life's greatest achievement. He was very particular, very meticulous about expressions and articulation and historical facts. Very important. You say anything, he will bring a counterexample from history, Chinese history, Indian history, or European history. How do you explain that? Just imagine some 20 years like that we had. I mean, the fellow betrayed us by leaving so early, 2000, at the age of 66 or 7, I forget now. Yeah. And so when we hold this lecture every year, we remember that legacy, that sinology has its impact on all aspects of Chinese studies. We have Mira and I edited Giri's writings, Science and Security and Science in China and India. And those are only a few of his seminal essays, but he has many, many more writings, which I hope now it should be possible to have an open library on Giri Deshinkar. And if it is a security principle, Dipankar Banerjee will remember, Giri would say, one of the earliest of this group, Giri would say, look, in such and such aspect of Chinese tradition, he would quote one of the 24 dynasties or something, some historical text to show from China that, look, here is an exception, or here, this is what will support you, use this. In other words, defense and security, he would connect with culture, history. I mean, an interdisciplinary scholar like Giri would provide a perspective which is that all-rounded. Therefore, if there is one legacy of Giri Deshinkar, it is that linkage with history, culture, that we must bring to all our studies. Authenticity and depth in language, culture, and literature and history of China. To the new generation, Giri Deshinkar legacy should be a permanent inspiration and guidance. Thank you.
Now I hand over to the chair to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, Professor Uberoi.
Thank you very much. It's my real pleasure to be here, and I feel absolutely swamped with sentimental memories. First, the film show in Manu's account, and remembering a person who was really a Renaissance person in this day. You can only say that. A gentleman, a person of great taste. I think there only so much has been said, but a few important things have been left out. One is that he was a superb cook and a great, wasn't he? I mean, he cooked the most amazing meals, including Chinese meals. And he had great taste in food. He had great taste in music. He had great taste in everything, including, what to wear and where. And another thing left out really was that he, along with C.R.M. Rao, were the joint founders of China Report. In some back alley off Barakumbha Road, right? And they were the first joint founders of something very different to what it looks now. I first came upon them when I saw an issue of China Report when I was at the Institute of Advanced Study in Simla. And I thought, this is amazing. Who are these people? And I wrote to them and said that I was very lonely because I'd been trained in Chinese studies and there was no one to talk to or talk with or write for. And they were so welcoming. They just, asked me to do book reviews and this and that, and really sort of opened the door to me, both of them. C.R.M. Rao, we have to remember at the same time. So I won't say any more about that wonderful scholar and gentleman. I think we should get on to the person that we have come to hear tonight. A person of absolute command of the Chinese materials and Chinese history. Published, I think you've read his biography, he has published books and books and books over a period of, I suppose, 50 years? Yes. And has taught China studies over a period of 50 years. He's stood for a great deal in Delhi, and by occupying the space he's occupied in Varanasi, in Banaras Hindu University, I think he's really been a landmark for everyone looking at what's happening in China studies. His work and the scope of his work is absolutely enormous. An early publication, much cited and much admired, was Peasant Society and Marxist Intellectuals in China. And he went on to look at, to edit books like India on the Silk Route, from local to global, papers in Asian history and culture, and with others, the 13 months in China, a subaltern Indian and colonial world. I might say that, I'm sorry to say, he's one of a pair. I wish his wife Kamal Sheel was here. Also, independently, a great scholar of Asian cultures, and I'm sure very important to the more recent publications that you've been making. I can't wait to read this book on cartography, geopolitics, and Huang Mao-chai's mission to India, 1878 to 1880. He is a master of modern history and someone whom we should all be very grateful and appreciative of. So without more, we go over to his present lecture. The title has been in front of you, India in the Chinese Quest for Nationalism and Modernity, Perspectives from Chinese Travel Writings. This is something that, of course, we haven't heard much about, and he is the very person to put it in front of us. So thank you for gracing us with your presence. We're really appreciative of this coming together of old friends.
Thank you so
After
much.
so many years.
Thank you so much. I don't know, I deserve so much of words about me. But yeah, Honorable Professor Uberoi, Chair of today's program, respected Professor Mahanti, distinguished professors, scholars, friends, students, and ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great honor and privilege to be invited to this prestigious 16th Professor Giri Deshingkar memorial lecture. And I'm greatly thankful to the ICS and Alka Acharya for providing this opportunity. I was almost forced to come, but I enjoyed coming here and meeting all the old friends and things. And this occasion is also very special for me because I'm very fortunate to have known and studied with Professor Deshingkar. While being a PhD student at the Department of Chinese and Japanese Studies at the University of Delhi, and Professor Mahanti, who was my supervisor, he introduced me to Professor Deshingkar to learn research methodology. And that used to be, really a great course. He was a great teacher. His range was vast. He was equally conversant with ancient to modern China and was, in a true sense, one of the foremost, sinologists in India. So as a teacher and mentor, he introduced us to the large canvas of Chinese studies and was always encouraging and helpful. I pay him my highest respect. My lecture, presentation today concerns, how and why did India matter in Chinese quest for nationalism and modernity. And this presentation is based on two modern Chinese travelogues on India, respectively by Huang Maocai and Kang Youwei, which have been translated by Kamal Sheel and I, and recently published as Wang's book is translated as Territorializing the Chinese Nation, Cartography, Geopolitics, and Wang Maocai's Mission to India, 1878-1880. And the other one, as Kang Youwei Engages India, his travel narratives and predicaments of civilization and nation. So in this, it must be pointed out, that till recently, travel narratives have normally been considered too subjective, too motivated, and not necessarily authentic sources for the mainstream history. It was only after the beginning of new histories that extended and pushed traditional boundaries of representations further that travel narratives linked with history are rigorously employed to produce not only ethno-history or a cultural discourse of great relevance about the other, but also offer alternative sources to facilitate and enrich deeper comprehension of various developments of their home country. Often written keeping in mind the reader of their own country, they are influenced by their own setting and culture to select and report that kind of information that resonates with or compatible with home requirements. As such, travel narratives map out the territories of mind, define contours of nations and communities, and determine forms of cultural and political representation. We know that India has been at the forefront of Chinese worldview since ancient times. Travel narratives of such Chinese Buddhist monks as Faxian, Xuanzang, and I Ching confirm dynamic intellectual exchanges that transcended Buddhism. While China and India shared a civilizational bonhomie, the shift from a civilizational state to the nation state began at the turn of 19th and beginning of 20th century. Chinese intellectual officials, activists turned their eyes to India to comprehend the nature of her contemporary status and development, both as a cultural and colonial state, and for lessons to be learned from India. Some of whom traveled to India and presented their views in travel narratives that they wrote for their audience back in China. These texts provide a valuable prism to view and gauge early 20th century intellectual and Chinese modernizers' mind as they grappled with the challenges and uncertainties of those times, with India as an important reference. Among Wang Maocai was the first, Chinese modernizer intellectual traveler to India. He was a trained cartographer in the service of imperial Qing state. Forsaking an opportunity to step on civil service ladder of success in imperial China, he opted for training in Western languages and modern sciences and specialized in cartography. A supporter of modern knowledge system and especially sciences, he valued West-inspired idea of nationalism and modernity. He was especially deputed by the Qing state to ascertain the situation of China, Tibet, India land route and the geopolitical motives of British India. The impetus was the Sino-British Treaty of Yalta in 1876 that extended British trade and travel rights to interior China. This led to some real apprehensions in China about the security and sovereignty of their territory, with increased movement of foreigners in their southwest frontier region at the time of the peak of so-called Great Game between Britain and Russia. Wang's task was to map the world and somewhat autonomous southwestern frontier of the empire and safeguard their actual or imagined national territory. During close to 2 years of his travel, he passed through Sichuan, Tibet, Yunnan, Myanmar by overland route and took a ship from Yangon to reach Kolkata in India. From there, he finally returned to Guangzhou by the maritime route. His various observations and descriptions of the travel region are inscribed in two short volumes entitled Shio Richid, Diary of the Travel to the West, and Intu Sachri, Miscellaneous Notes on India, published in 1886. This was the first known modern Chinese travelogue on India. The second substantive Chinese travelogue of that era was by Kang Youwei. Kang was a maverick intellectual and among first modernizers of late 19th century China. He was the leader of the famous 100-Day Reform Movement, which was the first comprehensive effort towards modernity. He stood against mimicking the Western idea of nationalism and modernity. After the failure of his reform movement, he escaped from China and roamed worldwide to gather information and knowledge to formulate a Chinese idea of nationalism and modernity. His 1901-1902 travelogue entitled Into Yauchi, Record of Travel to India, contains observation on history, politics, society, religion, art and architecture. He found more differences between China and Europe than similarities that existed between China and India. Changing political maps of the nation state in Europe in the 19th century was uncomforting to his idea of unity, peace, and harmony. To be sure, Khan's ill was against West-inspired modernity and nationalism that sought to annihilate civilization forces and enslave a country. Colonial India disturbed him. How could an India whose civilization enchanted not only China but also other global civilizations succumb to the colonial state and its culture without much resistance? China must draw lessons from Indian experience and redefine the idea of nationalism and modernity. What was the context of Wang Mao and Kang You's visit to India? For both Wang Mao and Kang Youwei, the common point for interest was Buddhism. India as a mother country of Buddhism, which became a major part of the Chinese knowledge and cultural system, along with Confucianism and Taoism, commanded respect and awe. For Chinese, India compared or paralleled uh, with China as a strong civilizational state, and Buddhism cemented the ties between the two. It was thus quite natural that both Wang and Kang had Buddhism in mind when they traveled to India in their respective quest for designing Chinese nation and modernity. Yet during their travel, they encountered not a Buddhist, but the other India, which they mapped and discussed. Both, however, lamented the withering of Buddhism that they identified India with. In a poem in his travelogue, Huang composed following lines: "The Ganges, with its many tributaries, still flows toward the east and brings foreign heretics from the western region. The Deer Park and the Greatwood Mountain still exist, enduring many disastrous spells. Yet now there is no Ananda to talk about Buddhist precept." He is referring to Venerable Anand. Retracing the path of elderly Master Sanchang, I traveled all over the cities of hundreds of kings in Tianchu, India. I came to India not to obtain Buddhist scriptures, but to accomplish drawing of maps of thousands of leagues of this country. What Wang Mao among Sai notes that India exists, but there is no one like Reverend Anand, the famous disciple of Buddha, who can talk about Buddhist words of wisdom for the knowledge seekers. China, in the changed current circumstances, when China embarked on the path of nation state, territorializing the Chinese nation, employing modern cartographic tools became important, and his travel was to complete the assigned work of drawing maps of India. This was, after all, the time when imperialist powers were exploring various routes to enter China to expand their trade and commerce and political hegemony on various pretexts. Incidents like the killing of British missionary diplomat or explorer Marjorie provided such a pretext. On February 21, 1875, Marjorie, while exploring the ancient southern Silk Route to China through India, Myanmar, Tibet, and Yunnan, was killed by the locals. This traditional trade route to China was lucrative, but physically not very safe for traders and travelers who moved without large contingents or caravans. The route passed across a large, semi-independent frontier area that was full of steep mountains, dense forests, and gushing rivers, and was inhabited and ruled by various tribes who frequently defied and rebelled against Han hegemony and sought to control the route through protection fees or other benefits. Marjorie was most probably on a secret mission to explore the feasibility of opening channels of communication, probably a viable railroad connection between India and China over the traditional Yunnan-Burma-India route. His deeper encroachment in China through this route led to apprehension regarding the British opening up a southern land route to China. These trepidations were much more immediate and serious among the local people, traditionally inhabiting and controlling the volatile frontier region or borderlands, who possibly attacked and killed Marjorie and his assistants in that area. Enraged by the Marjorie incident of 1875, the British forced Chinese to offer more concessions in the Sino-British Treaty of Yantai in 1876. This guaranteed the British right to travel to Tibet and interior China from the southern land route from India. This aroused various concerns. Chinese feared for the security of their territory as the British and other foreigners, both privately and officially, began to encroach on Tibet through various routes in the entire long frontier. Some traveled through the southern route to the middle of Sichuan, privileging the provision of the treaty and exploring trade and communication through Tibet and Yunnan. The frequency of such explorations further increased after the British occupation of Darjeeling in North India. Governor of Sichuan, Tin Pao Chen, dreaded the impact of opening a road from Darjeeling to Tibet for foreign trade on the security of his state. Further, as China began to be surrounded by foreign imperialist forces, its status as an empire state began to be increasingly threatened. This necessitated the opening up of a special office, the Chongli Yamen, in 1861 to deal with foreign affairs as a nation state with a recognized and accepted national boundary. Consequently, the territorialization of the mostly customary frontier area became imperative. Thus began the exercise to draw fresh or updated maps using modern cartographical methods. Ting Pao Chen memorialized the Kwangshu Emperor to send a qualified imperial official to explore and map the border for strategic purposes. The emperor approved the dispatch of a Chinese official delegation under the leadership of Wang Maocai to survey and map the route from Chengdu to Tibet and 5 Indias. He bestowed upon Wang a fourth-ranked official with full power and authority of a second-rank officer of the Qing bureaucracy. This was the first official mission from China to India in modern times. Wang was then 35 years old. Wang Maocai and his entourage of 6 persons, consisting of subordinates, servants, and cooks, set off from Sichuan on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month in 1878. He proposed to take the overland route from the Chengdu, Tibet to India, which was shorter. Traveling on a rugged, arduous mountain route, he reached Patang. The hostility of the local Tibetan group, who were highly suspicious of his motives to travel to India, however, forced him to take the alternative but longer Yunnan, Myanmar, India route. Turning to the south, he journeyed on this no less perilous but relatively safer route for 211 days from Chongqing and past Lijiang, Dali, and Yongfang prefectures to arrive at Momian, the famous custom town in Baoshan city located on China-Myanmar border. From there, he reached Xinjie and boarded a steamer and plied on the majestic Irrawaddy River to the port city of Yangon via the capital city of Myanmar, Awa. In the course of his travel, he noted the location of each place that he visited in modern geographic coordinates of latitude and longitude and introduced their significant physical and ethnological descriptions in brief. He stayed in Myanmar for close to a month and detailed his observation of the area and its history, culture, and present status under the British occupation in his diary. In the 3rd month of 1879, he left by ship for Calcutta. He spent more than 6 months in India, staying a good amount of time in Kolkata, the ultimate colonial city at that time. From there, he also made a trip to Darjeeling, ostensibly to meet the higher colonial official in the summer capital, and areas under the British occupation in the northeast. Later, he embarked on a journey to India's hinterland, covering Allahabad, Agra, Delhi, Mumbai, and other places. He was thus able to get more than a bird's overview of India and conveyed his impression in his writing. However, clarified that he would not list all which were already listed in earlier works on India and China, but focus on the contemporary situation. Kang Yuwei's trip to India. So unlike Huang's trip to India on an assigned task, Kang Yuwei traveled to India to learn from Indian historical experiences, mm, instances to develop and validate his theory of nationalism and modernity. Forced to escape from China after the collapse of his short-lived 100-day reform movement, he wandered to various countries to muster support for his reformist agenda and protect his patron, Emperor Guangxu. During his wandering, he visited India twice. His first and most extended trip to India was from December 12, 1901 to April 1903. He arrived in Kolkata from Penang by ship and left via Rangoon to Java and other places in Southeast Asia with the support of overseas Chinese. He stayed in India altogether close to 17 months, remaining mostly in Darjeeling after visiting Calcutta, Allahabad, Agra, Mathura, Delhi, Lucknow, Varanasi, and Gaya in the first couple of months. The trip exposed to him the people and landscape of the northern mainland of India under the peak of British colonial rule after the extermination of the mighty Mughal Empire and the disappearance of the ancient land of Gautam Buddha. The second trip was short. Khan then stayed in India for about 2 to 3 months. Starting once again from Penang, he came to Chennai, then to Tanjore, and finally going up to Mumbai on the west coast and returning via Kandy in Sri Lanka to Penang. He covered southern and western India regions he had missed during his first trip. India was influential in Khan's worldview. He recorded his Indian travel experiences, mainly based on his first trip, in a narrative entitled Into Yauchi, Record of Travel to India, and an unusually long later essay of 18 pages to his disciple Liang Chi-Chao from his base camp in Darjeeling. They formed a basis for what some contemporary analysts project an erratic, mysterious, and hostile Chinese position on India, while others view there a civilizational bonhomie between the two that got misplaced by national anxieties. Like Huang, Kang also laments fading away of Buddhism in India in a poem in his travelogue, few lines of which read, "Seeking Buddhism everywhere over thousands li of land, found all its traces wiped out by rapid and unpredictable transformations. Lamenting the disappearance of such a comprehensive and luxuriant religion, I wonder about looking at the trivial matter of writer's dynasty and people's territory." That's about nationalism and modernity. In his preface to Travelogue, Kang emphasizes the importance of learning from the Indian historical traditions and experiences. In the book and newspaper, Kang writes, many people talk about building a self-reliant China. Attempts are being made to push forward examples of development in countries as distant as France and the United States and as close as the Philippines and Poland. Oh, how could a Chinese advocate an idea that could extend the nation itself? No reason and good sense can justify this. After reading many European and American books on their own, their minds have been deeply clouded by the historical codes of France and USA. They consider this to be an irresistible trend which would hasten momentous power and influence all over the world. They believe that if this work is carried out with resolute determination, it would necessarily succeed despite lack of some theoretical plans. Alas, they always erroneously cite the exquisite examples of France and the United States. Reading European and American new books, I do not find any reference to historical developments in Asia. Reading and disseminating new scholarship, exclusion of knowledge of the other exquisite countries evince their ignorance. He says, fortunately, there is a country whose example can assist us in taking preemptive measures and which can act as our bright mirror, a lighthouse, and sufficiently reliable model. It does not correspond with the category represented by France and the United States and is totally different. Our fellow compatriot must pay attention to India in assessing the benefit and loss from its achievement and conduct. If they learn from the affairs of this country, they will at least not suffer too great a failure or total extinction. After all, he rhetorically asked, which country is most similar to our country? It is indeed India. China, Khan proudly emphasizes, belongs to Asia and the Asian race. Its politics and culture are like Asian countries. Therefore, she can only be compared with such big and old civilized Asian countries like India, Persia, and Turkey, which are akin to her in the richness of history and culture. The point is not which country is better than the other. Further, he says, using a Confucian locution, India and China are like brothers, Lu and Wei. They cannot be reviled, compared. One may see here the origins of, somebody was asking about Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, slogan. One see here, origin of the oft repeated slogan, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. So what lays, so these, therefore no wonder that his enchantment with Indian civilization and disenchantment with his current status as a nation under the British colonial rule fill up most of his two writings. These frame his exploration, alignment, and projection of civilizational affinities in charting the course of Chinese nation state as against the Western model of the nation state and nationalism. So, what lessons did Hong Mu-chai and Kang learn from contemporary India? While both Huang and Kang had India as an important reference point because of its significant historical civilizational connection with uh, China, contemporary India intrigued both differently. For Huang, contemporary India was colonial India, which affirmed his faith in the Western model of nation state and modernity. Despite its incompatibility with the Qing ruling ideas, his narrative focused more on transformation in India. It was, as Edier, who has also commented on Huang, notes, was progressivist oriented and not so negative, and recommended looking carefully at the modernization process that he witnessed in India. In British India, he was fascinated by the colonial state's use of modern methods to administer the vast territory under its rule. Various new technical devices, products of Western scientific discovery, and various modern systems of communications like telegraph and telephone that provided swift and efficient communication from the top to bottom chain of administration was impressive. He liked the power of steam engines and railways that facilitated the fast movement of people and materials over long distance. Kolkata's clean and wide roads and streets with gas lamps appeared very convenient. The supply and control of water everywhere in the city through chains of water pipes and water taps were a novelty. The dissemination of modern knowledge through the museum, the zoo, and the botanical garden appealed to him. Rigorous training and disciplines at the modern schools, especially the Western art school, where, unlike the Chinese style of painting, the emphasis was laid on drawing mirror-like representation of the object captivated him. He noticed the efficient police administration and the human and transparent judicial system. Taxes were heavy, but the state expenditure of these funds for public convenience kept people happy and quiet. Huang felt that the local Indians perceived the British rule as a welcome change in comparison with the cruel and lawless administration of the earlier native rulers. On the whole, Huang found the colonial local administration in India less corrupt, more efficient, and equitable. Yet, on the flip side, Huang also negatively reacted to the state's maximum possible extortion from the ordinary masses and the extravagant lifestyle of the British officials. Huang's commitment to the West-inspired nationalism, imbued with the spirit or ethics of capitalism in the Bavarian sense, is fully evident when he makes a distinction between China and the West. Highlighting such strains in Huang's ideology, Chang Ke, another commentator on Huang, notes that this appeared because his belief that China's political structure benefits the poor first, while the Western government supports the rich. Perhaps in the Western tradition, being poor is shameful, and so Western people are all working hard to get rich. So while Huang did not detail custom and practices of native Indians in his narratives, he noticed the beginning of westernization among the higher echelon of the local people due to British influence. They were the ones who practiced the Western ethics to get rich. However, does not find much change in the practice of common people from what was described earlier in narratives of Wei Yuan's Haikuan Tutri or Shuchi Yu's Inghuan Trilwei, written in 1840s, which included, very negative descriptions of India. Huang believed that the slow pace of social transformation in India originated from the laser intervention of the British in the characteristic Indian social system after the Great Rebellion of 1857. This event ended the rule of the East India Company and brought in direct control of the British Crown, which pursued the policy of supporting the feudal setup and minimal interference in religious custom and belief on the one hand, and the opening of the economic domain on the other hand. This is evident in the British segregation of the British Indian Army based on religion and caste to maintain their control and other such administrative acts. Their motives remained focused on turning India into an ideal colonial capitalist market. To be sure, Huang's preference for westernization and his exaggerated description of the exotic were quite similar to many late Chinese travelers in foreign or Western lands like Ko Song Tao and Wang Tao and others. Similar fascination for colonial establishment and objects can also be found in Khan's travelogue, who sought hybrid modernization and reform to rejuvenate China. Huang's unabased admiration for the British Indian state, however, appeared uncharitable to the Confucianist state and might have placed hurdles in his rise to higher active positions of administration during the change. Yet Huang was not oblivious to the encroachment and movement of the Western imperialist forces and its consequences on the rise of China as a strong nation state. He noted disastrous consequences of the Assam tea production in the British-controlled tea gardens on the traditional Sichuan, Tibet, Yunnan tea trade through the southwest Silk Route. The British had planted a large number of tea bushes in Assam, with the help of Fujian and Zhejiang tea planters. They imitated the production of tea from Sichuan and Yunnan, which was exported to nearby Tibet. Ting Chen, governor of Sichuan, was worried that the development of Assam by the British would cause it to send troops from the local area to encroach on Tibet in case of any obstacle to this trade. Wang's visit to Darjeeling, Assam, and nearby tea-producing regions in northeast India confirmed the wide expanding tea production there. He was, in fact, the first whistleblower regarding the possibility of Chinese dominance in the world tea trade getting overturned by the development of tea trade in Assam. However, Wang's solution to the problem was different. When somebody raised the issue of closing the southern silk trade route to defend the country from the possible foreign invasion, he responded that I don't know if the circulation of commercial goods is enough to enrich the country and protect the border. How could its closure be prudent for the defense of borders? Using the same reasoning, he became the first Chinese to support the construction of railway to connect Yunnan with Southeast Asia. In his travel narrative, he proposed that if the railway was built from Burma and extended to Yunnan, the distance by land and water would not exceed 10 days, and it would be only one-third of the distance from Nanyang to eastern Guangdong. Therefore, this road is not only for the benefit of the British, but also for the benefit of the Chinese. For him, the capitalist free market and free trade were not bad if they were managed well by the state. Huang's strong patriotic enthusiasm and knowledge of contemporary geopolitics were apparent in his description of the historical evolution of the long frontier in the western part of China and neighboring countries. He informed that any possibility of a threat of British invasion of China through Tibet and the southwest frontier region lurked primarily from a narrow pass in the Himalayan region of Darjeeling and Sikkim, located between Bhutan and Nepal. Having acquired the hill tract from Sikkim and established a Darjeeling district, the British finally annexed Sikkim and made it their protected state. Having noted the British construction of military blockhouses and stationing of foreign troops, as well as the laying of direct rail track there from the plains being done with a long-term plan, he observed that the unrestrained heavy investment in railways, the settlement of Fukienese and Cantonese people, and the covetous eyes on the Tibetan territory and the trade route were ominous signs for China. The British colonizers would seize any opportunity that promised financial benefits. They first craftily extend their power with commercial dominance, then infiltrate and interfere in the local politics, and finally force all to follow them. The present stance of that was indicated in forming a bond with Bhutan through the offer of heavy financial aid on the one hand and in gradual dismembering of Sikkim on the other hand. The possibility of their indulgence in a clash on the frontier should therefore not be taken lightly. In order to save China, he advised the governor Ting to protect Jiangsu, Tingzi, and Bhutan and develop a good friendly relationship with Nepal by supporting its rise as a solid buffer state. Huang's travel narrative covered a vast canvas from India to Southeast Asia in his geographical observation. I hope not time is okay. That just so I'll just give you the main points. So, like he suggested that like a proper consular protection to Chinese be provided in Nanyang region. His strong plea to court to establish more and more consulate of the Chinese nation also indirectly signaled an end to the fast eroding system of hierarchical tributary relationship in favor of emerging non-hierarchical and equality-based global connections. Wang noted that after the end of ban on the overseas travel, diplomatic communication, and trade activity between China and other countries expanded. Developments of maritime routes and playing of safer and faster steamships reduced the time and distance of travel. Faraway countries interacted much more frequently with China for various purposes. And so he prioritized a program for strengthening of maritime defense uh, through wide exploration of the sea, training people in modern foreign languages and studies. Another area that drew Wang's attention was the concept of buffer state in foreign policy. The 18th century Western theory of the balance of power, along with the concept of buffer state as part of the strategy and diplomacy in foreign policy, received his appreciation and approval. He realized problems in maintaining the traditional Chinese worldview and its application through tributary relations. In his narratives, he recommended connections with Nepal and developing it as a strong buffer state between British India and China. Observing the growing importance of the Southeast Asian countries, he favored their treatment as equal partners in the world of nation state. Adopting a foreign policy based on contacting and connecting with countries to strengthen barriers, he believed would protect and strengthen China's status in Southeast Asia. Wang's narrative and other available essays put him among those contemporary modernist intellectuals who looked ahead of time and sought an alternative discourse for Chinese predicaments. Then we have some examples of, then is the Hang Wei, So that was, major highlight of the book which Wang Maocai produced as a travel diary to India. So how India mattered to Kang Wei. So as opposed to Wang's pro-Western idea of nation and modernity that found confirmation in colonial India, Kang finds support for his views in historical experience of civilizational India. He writes, if we consider laws and statutes, customs and system of rights, I would reckon that China resembles India in 8 to 9 cases out of 10. The land of India is greater than our country. Its civilization dawned earlier than our country. Its philosophy flourished more extensively than ours. Its artistic magnificence and refined technological skill exceed ours. Global scope of its business and trade is much more distant. Its resources and products are more abundant and the land more fertile, while law and statutes, customs, culture, and education, and system of rights, etiquette are almost of the same level as of China. Khan takes his contention further by loudly proclaiming that India has been the source of global civilizational current. It has impacted even those countries and civilizations which developed in the Western world. Recognizing the achievement and contribution of India at the global level, he points out that Indian civilization originated 6,000 years ago and the European race, Aryan, migrated out from India only. The Greeks learned their decimal system and mathematics and rose high up. Brahmins also taught their four Vedas 4,000 years back and are still there. So this is how he praises India. So his enchantment with India is premised on civilizational affectations highlighted by many cultural similarities between them. His disenchantment was with contemporary fragmented colonial India that did not counter the modern West-inspired nation-state and permitted dismemberment of the country. This led to his anxieties about the preservation of China. Historically, both countries shared many strands of ideology and wisdom and successfully preserved their hybrid, diversified civilization. However, India's failure to unitedly and vigorously resist imperialist encroachments and develop a robust modern nation state served as a bad omen for China. India thus became a negative example for emulation. The question before Kang was how to preserve Chinese civilization through the introduction of nationalism and modernity without its concomitant imperialist and colonial forces. What does the historical experience of India offer for China? This was a complex issue. India perished because of its states became independent, and India politically became a conglomerate of hundreds of autonomous or semi-autonomous states under the British sovereignty. And China may also not remain safe if it follows the same. Kang's such contention was based on his confidence of on tradition's strength and potential, which was the source for framing his ideology of nationalism and modernity. Its West inspired version that required changes in Chinese view of emperorship, the shift from an empire to a nation, and the subjection of the existing universal culture and tradition to an alien ideology troubled him. He demonstrated significant differences between European and Asian historical experiences to argue that the Western model is unsuitable. Independent nation states of Europe are small both in size and population. Their histories follow different trajectories than those of Asian countries. In fact, despite a history of more than 1,000 years, well demarcated national boundaries, and completely separate national identity, these 10 or so European states are engaged in perpetual rivalry and constant warfare with each other. Changing political map of the nation states in Europe in the 19th century was uncomforting to Kang's idea of unity, peace, and harmony. While he admired flourishing development in science and philosophy in Europe, he believed their ideology, based on constant conflict and war, accounted for their vitality and dynamism. For him, traditional Confucian state and society, once reformed, was still more potent and powerful. His interest in Europe was less as a historian, but more as a Chinese reformer. He frequently drew analogies between historical events in Europe and China and used Chinese optics to commend or condemn them. Kang's dilemma was how to preserve the core value and spirit of civilization with its tradition and empire while following the agenda of nationalism and the pursuit of modernity and progress. He therefore, on the one hand, emphasized on protecting and preserving the territorial integrity of the Qing nation state, which encompassed a segmented society consisting of Tibetan, Mongol, Manchus, Muslim races, and religions scattered both inside and outside its Han-specific country. On the other, he bestowed the fundamental unity to all the segmented elements of society within a Chinese civilization bounded by the doctrine of the sages. It thus overcomes the limitation of both segmentation and territorial boundaries in conceptualizing the Chinese nation beyond territorial borders and encompassing civilizational elements. So when his most trusted disciple, Liang Qichao, announced in 1902 the virtue of nationalism, Kang was in India, and Kang was aghast by Liang's idea of nationalism that promoted fragmentation of country by establishing autonomous specific identity-based provinces in a multi-ethnic hybrid empire nation-state of China. A national revolution that threatened the unity of China and sought to build ethnic majority-based nation-state was dangerous. This marked the end of the hybrid empire and civilization and all that which characterized China. Mm. He believed in the Qing government fostering of a strong national identity by bringing together all ethnic groups within one single state to be named Chunghuakou, State of China. This is necessary because Han Chinese, Manchus, Mongols, Muslims, and Tibetans are all Chinese without any distinction. They belong to a single state. Kang avers that the strength of the hybrid Chinese empire state lies in its multi-ethnicity. Its strong multi-ethnic army has the power to repulse threats from abroad. He argues that we must strengthen the Qing state, whose scenic characteristics could hardly be doubted. He explains that the Chineseness of the Qing has been apparent from the beginning of their rule. China's ritual, music, political system all follow the past. Chokong and Confucius, our legal system and customs have not differed from the treaties of Song and Ming dynasties. Both Han and Manchu people equally share ruling power and interest. Privileges enjoyed by the royal family are the same as those enjoyed by Han, Tang, Song, and Ming dynasties. Further, the Sinicide Manchus have significantly contributed to Chinese territory by extending the control over three northwest provinces of Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Tibet, thus making China the world's largest country. The Chinese now have enough credential to aspire for world leadership. Such a vision for China will fail if modern Chinese intellectuals keep espousing the cause of autonomous provinces by splitting China into small territories. This idea is bizarre and confounds right and wrong. Hence, the hybridity of the Chinese empire needs to be saved from the Western concept of nationalism, accompanied by a specific notion of progress and modernity. The path for modernity and progress has to be found within Chinese historical experiences. It has to be based on context other than the capitalist West, which generated or imagined a set of space, language, belief, and history that was self or ours against a despised and external other. Kang, as Wang Hui remarks, discuss such questions as China, Han ethnicity, and Chinese culture in terms of hybridity, projected the view of a hybrid China to resist European-style ethnic nationalism and formed a capacious Chinese identity or imperial Chinese mm, identity. China would perish unless it engages with alternative or indigenous ideas of modernity to reform in tandem. If it does not reform in tandem with its civilizational legacy, such projection of nationalism overwhelms Kang's travel narrative. Then, like Kang is often accused of, saying that India is a static and dead country. Kang believed that several potent forces uh, Kang, believed that several potent forces in Indian and Chinese civilization and tradition may play a significant role in reviving India. The Buddha Dharma and its religion and cultural relics created a dynamic, sacred sphere in Chinese society. It is a solid binding factor for the connection between China and India. So, like Neo-Confucianists who became the harbinger of indigenous modernity during the Song and Ming period and provided for the beginning of the earlier modern phase in China, Kang also found ample support for expanding his vision in Buddhist discourse of reform in Confucianism. In India, he visited Buddhist sites and was overwhelmed with sentiment when he picked up a piece of ancient stone from such site. He, he was aghast when a guide in a museum identified a Buddhist statue as a Chinese god. He was shocked. Buddhism, he commented, originated and flourished in this land more than 3,000 years back. Yet Indians say Buddha was the god of some other country. The thought of Buddhism turning into a doomed religion made him shed tears, and he consoled himself, thinking, perhaps heaven's mandate is like this. Kang also found resilience and buoyancy of the Brahminical religion to survive the onslaught of Western intervention. Incredible and incomparable, the power of religion attracted him to offer possibilities to protect and preserve the nation, and he even hoped for the rise of Reformed Confucianism as such a speech. He notes India has been dead for the last 100 years. At least 200 people still believe in Brahman religion. They are strong-willed. They have neither succumbed to Christianity's influence nor transformed their rites and rituals under the British government. In the whole country, there are still many scholars. Some are trained at the colonial or Western medium educational institution, and some of whom have doctoral degrees, yet they remain firmly religious and resilient in the heart. Hinduism or Brahminism did not perish, but resisted the political and cultural advances of the British and the West. This new breed of intellectuals are harbingers of modernity. It cannot be said that it happened before the country became dead. They are leaders of contemporary socio-religious movement and fitted well in Kang's conception of an ideal native nationalist. Okay, so just so many examples of how Kang was promoting a civilizational unity and rejecting the modern idea of nationalism. Like he has anxiety. So there was in short can be said there was civilizational bonhomie and national anxieties in Kangyuwei's idea. So I think I should finish here. Yeah, it's all there's a long thing about that. He was very upset. When he saw Karjan's Darbar in Calcutta in 1901, and there saw many Indian kings. They came there in their best of dresses. They paraded before Lord Karjan and took an oath towards loyalty to the British. And Karjan gave them, one silver coin each. So he said that if Indians can, for one coin lose their, nationality, it is, something, that should be pondered about. And I would never, forsake my country for one piece of, silver coin. So these are, kind of expression that you find, in this thing. And so long. So it's basically, this, translations are important. And there are many, such translations, which are, many such books, which have not been translated. I have selected, Wang No Chai because he was the first one, and he talked about, how maps, I did not talk about, cartography. Like Chinese, were quite clever in making maps. And from, say, Chen Lung's time, they were, making maps. But the Chinese style of maps showed, natural, say, spots on the map, like forest, lakes, river, and there was no, longitude and latitude. So that, became necessary when Chinese began to, say, negotiate with the foreign powers, where maps were, maps had, longitude and latitude. So it had to be, so like it did not, provide them opportunity to, fit maps. And also, like there was a shift from frontier to border, in nation state. Frontier regions were, flexible. It's like, if you are powerful, your influence reach, to that extent. And frontiers were also very autonomous, and they paid tribute to, whosoever was powerful. So there was no fixed boundary. So China had, a lot of problems when they were, fixing boundaries with Burma. And I understand, that they prefer, Burmese model of, solution of boundary problems. So, and then they also had, humiliation maps. Callahan has a very good article on humiliation map, the perceived map of China. That imagined that China had, that much of area of influence. That was based on, again on civilizational concept, not a nation state. And so, and with, Chinese idea of China extending beyond, boundary and covering, the whole Chinese population. These are points, which should be taken into consideration of and discussed. So thank you so much.
I think everyone here, like me, would be longing to read the text of this. And your final words, of course, put it into a wider context of contemporary frontier problems, frontier or border problems, as the case may be. It's not usual to have questions and answers and so on after a distinguished lecture. And in any case, we have exhausted our time. But I think I can say for everyone here that we'll go home with many thoughts in our head and problems in our mind. This was a perfect piece of illustration in its structure. The two different people commenting in the same period for different reasons and different modes on their experience of travel in India. I can't think of a more enlightening way in which to express this. And when I look back and I thought, you've introduced a different world. Because when I was a student, we learnt about the age of discovery, where heroic white men went out and discovered that world out there. And probably in India, people were taught through the same textbooks too. And this gives us a completely different grounding on viewing the other from two persons of different backgrounds, but loyal Chinese citizens, as it were, themselves. So I really hope that we will see this lecture in print, have the time to go over and absorb the huge amount of details, and as you did just in your postscript, related to the present business of negotiating boundaries and borders. So thank you very much for that. It was a wonderful talk, and we have much to learn from it and look forward to seeing the text. Thank you so much. A good big hand for him. A final word from yes.
So, Professor Uberoi, so may I end the program formally?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
I think Professor Mahanti wanted to have a last word. No? Okay.
So, with this, we come to the end of the 16th Giri Deshingkar Memorial Lecture. We thank Professor Kamal Sheel, Professor Patricia Uberoi, and Professor Manoranjan Mohanty for gracing today's lecture with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also offer our gratitude to the audience. The video of today's lecture shall be available on the ICSS YouTube channel soon. Thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen.